Yes, EFL Championship Game Week Review is here. Hello everybody, my name is The Loyal Royal and today we're going to be doing a review of the Championship fixtures on the weekend. So let's crack straight into it with Sheffield United versus Ipswich Town. I mean, wow, the grass isn't always greener, Ruben? But look, what can I say? Sheffield United have had a really poor start and I think it will continue. You know, they brought in Chris Wilder really recently and I think he'll try and change those results, and they've got a good side there. You know, some good players, Jeff Tanganga, there we go. And, you know, players like Gustavo Hamer can really change a game in their favour. And, you know, he shouldn't really be playing in the Championship, Gustavo Hamer. I think he's a level above, I'll say that nonetheless. But look, Ipswich, what can I say? They're my title favourites. They have been since the start of the season. 5-0 win at home. Jayden Philogene proving why he's a very good player for this level. And I think Ipswich will kick on and potentially come second or first. That's my kind of idea. They were my title favourites, but I think them coming second could be a possibility. But look, I'd look into this in a way that Ipswich Town destroyed a really poor Sheffield United side. And hopefully, fingers crossed, the Blades won't be that dull for too much longer. Moving on to our next game, Preston versus Middlesbrough. I mean, look, it's a good draw for Preston. I mean, they've had a decent home record for a long time, and I do think that they've sort of, you know, solidified themselves as a Championship team. I did think they'd be down there, you know, in the relegation battle, but look, Heckingbottom's a good manager, and I think a 2-2 draw with a high-flying Middlesbrough is a very good result for them. Middlesbrough would be a very bit disappointed after not going to Deepdale and not getting all 3 points. But look, they've got a good squad, they've got a good manager in Rob Edwards, and Severa House F. Naipan from Man City, what a player. Next up, it's Charlton versus Millwall, and this one ended 1-1. And look, Charlton carrying on that sort of stigma from being really hard to beat. They had it in League One last season. That's part of the reason why they ended in the playoffs. Do I think they'll end the playoffs this season in the Championship? Definitely not. But look, what can I say? Nathan Jones' pre-match interviews and after-match interviews are still entertaining as ever. He's a top manager, and I do think they'll stay up this season with him in charge. Millwall, not as ruthless as I would have thought, to be fair. The Lions lost their claws, and I think they need to do a lot more to finish out in those playoff positions and chasing playoff positions, where I think they will finish this season. You know, I think they've got a lot of good players in that team. They've got a lot of money as well from sales of Roman Esse, Japhet Tanganga, and Zian Fleming to Burnley. They've got a lot of money in the club. They just need to invest it right and hopefully make some signings in January to try and bolster that squad. They've had a rocky start, but I think hopefully, fingers crossed, they get in the playoffs. Coventry versus Norwich up next, and this one also did end 1-1. And if you wanted a game to disprove the XG philosophy, this is the one. Coventry had an XG of about 4, and the goal they ended up scoring with their XG was absolutely comical. So I must admit, if you want to go watch that, it's very funny. But Coventry have had a really good start so far. The CBS is a fortress for them, and I do think they'll finish in the playoffs. They will finish, I think, getting promoted to the Premier League this season. I know, a bit of a rash take there, but I think it will happen. Frank Lampard doing amazing work over there in CV2, and I think, look, you talk about this, Norwich, what can I say? Liam Manning, the manager from Bristol City, I think he's done well coming into a Norwich side. They sold their midfielder to Ipswich, Munoz, I think his name was, Munoz, and you know they've done well to get a 1-1 result at the CBS. They were leading up until the 95th minute, but please, if you can, go watch that goal that Coventry scored. It was absolutely hilarious. But Coventry will look to push on, and the same with Norwich. So for both sides here, probably not a bad result. Next up, it was Blackburn versus Watford, and look, not really much to say about this one. Blackburn really needed that result, to be honest. Valentin Ismail is working with a very tight budget over there at Blackburn Rovers, and the two teams were kind of neck and neck with each other before this game, and Blackburn that was a massive result for them, I must admit. Watford looking a bit shaky. No Nestoroy Irankunda free kicks this week. He's a specialist at them, and I think that was a really shrewd pickup from Watford this season. But hopefully, you know, Blackburn, they've done well and they can probably push on, and maybe the ownership issues there will get sorted, hopefully. And, you know, Watford, again, not the team I was expecting and not the sort of performance I was expecting from them, but they can do a lot better and they really shouldn't be where they are, and they probably should be pushing for the playoffs. That's what, you know, the sort of ideology of Watford has been for the past couple of years. They've been up and down, yo-yo sort of team. So this is definitely a low point for them, I'll admit. And I do think, you know, sacking Tom Cleverley wasn't very clever. Oh, God, I'll stop now. But you get what I mean. Bristol City 3, Sheffield Wednesday 0 is our next match here. And look, another game week in the Championship, another Sheffield Wednesday loss. What can be said there? I don't think anything will change unless the owner leaves. The results on the pitch will stay negative. They might get a point here, a point there, and maybe an odd win, but there's really not much to say good stuff about over there at Sheffield Wednesday. You know, Bristol City high flying up to third in the table after a 3-0 win. I mean, I always thought they were going to be falling off this season a bit with losing their manager, but they've proved me wrong. The Robins have risen, and yeah, I've got to say fair play to them. I think that every single team will look at Sheffield Wednesday this season and go, well, that's an easy 3 points, like Bristol City have done here. And, you know, it's just really tough from a you know, Sheffield Wednesday perspective, because look, you look at them and they go, they've got nothing that, you know, substantial to really say about on the pitch. You know, they've got Barry Bannan who signed a new deal somehow, and that's really the only player I can kind of say. Their goalkeeper's done all right, but, you know, they've only got a few first-team players there, and it's really, really hard times. And from a Reading fan, I know exactly what it's like for you Sheffield Wednesday fans, so hopefully it gets sorted very, very soon. Well, the Mark Robins train keeps on chugging as Stoke City won against Birmingham 1-0 on the weekend. Stoke City, high flyers this season so far. Not the sort of start I would have expected, but when you've got Mark Robins in charge, anything is possible. It's really nice to see him do well after the Coventry City job. And, you know, I was there the last match that he had for Coventry. I think the trigger was already there to be pulled by Doug King beforehand. Last season they lost 2-1, I think, to Derby, and that obviously was his last match, Mark Robins, for Coventry City. But it's always nice seeing him do well at a new club in Stoke, who have had a few low years recently, who, you know, want to be in that Premier League position and that fighting. And at the moment, with Mark Robins in charge, they definitely are. From a Birmingham point, I wouldn't look too much into it. It is 2 losses in a row, which could affect morale, but they still will be all right come the end of the season. Yeah, they've got some good players. I'm still not entirely sure about Jay Stansfield. That's a whole other conversation. It's heartbreak for the Swans as 3 points were snatched away from them by the Tigers' claws, also known as John Egan. Yes, it was Swansea City 2, Hull City 2 at the Swansea.com stadium at the weekend. And look, Swansea, one of those teams where I thought they would have pushed on really, really well this year. You know, having new owners like Luka Modric and Snoop Dogg, which I would never have thought a couple of years ago. But hey-ho, here we are. We've come a long way from those Meet You goals in 2014, I think it was. But look, you know, Swansea would be disheartened not to come away here with a win. Hull City a bit disheartened with their whole ownership situation. You know, they've got a transfer embargo, which I think they navigated really, really well. But hey, Hull City needed that. I mean, look, a 97th minute winner from John Egan. You can't complain with that at all. And the Tigers keep roaring on to the next game week in the Championship. West Brom's good run of form comes to an end with a 1-0 loss to Derby County. Derby County resorting to the dark arts to win this game, with their only shot on target being their only goal. And you know what? I've got to say fair play to John Eustace and his Rams. Derby haven't had the greatest start. West Brom have had a great start, to be honest, and I do think that Derby will be all right come the end of the season. West Brom, obviously, I wouldn't think they'd be in the playoffs, you know, with Ryan Mason. I think this is his first proper senior management job. He's been Tottenham interim gaffer a few times when they've been changing over. The most common one, I think, for me was, I think it was Jose Mourinho. They had a cup final. Wasn't so sure if it was the FA Cup or Carabao Cup, but we'll get to that later. In Wembley, and I think he was in charge after Jose Mourinho was sacked, which, you know, you don't sack Jose Mourinho just before a cup final. I mean, Daniel Levy, what are you doing? But anyway, you know, West Brom, they've had a really good start so far under Ryan Mason. They've got a few really, really good players in there, and I think, you know, they'll be all right come the end of the season, but I'm not entirely sure whether these results will affect them going forward in that playoff campaign and that sort of automatic promotion campaign where they want to be. But look, it's a 1-0 loss. They resorted to the dark arts to win, which is fair enough, and I respect that from John Eustace. But yeah, West Brom 0, Derby County 1. There were no Disney fairy tale endings for Wrexham in this next match, as they lost at home to QPR 3-1. And I'll say 3 words here to sum up this game. Kone scores goals. What a machine from League One. I saw him last year a few times. I mean, what a striker he is. That was probably signing of the summer for me in the EFL Championship this year. QPR making some really good business off the teams in League One, and they've done that. They showed Wrexham who they are. This is the Championship. This isn't your Disney fairy tale stuff anymore. The most competitive league in the world, and Phil Parkinson's job looks to be a little bit shaky at the moment. But look, what can I say? Wrexham, you know, Parkinson, as I said, looks to be a shaky job, and I think he will be gone very, very soon. Parkinson's style of football is very simple, and the sort of players he had in the League One and League Two days didn't have as big as the egos the players they brought in this year, which I think will sort of diminish them a lot. You know, you bring in your Connor Codys, your Ben Sheafs, your Nathan Broadheads, compared to your Ollie Palmers and your Paul Mullins. I mean, the ego is probably going to be there with a lot of those players anyway, but having to heighten that in the Championship with Phil Parkinson as gaffer isn't really a good thing for Wrexham. So I do think he'll be gone very, very soon. But it did end QPR 3, Wrexham 1. And last but not least, the most boring South Coast derby I've ever seen in Southampton versus Portsmouth. And this one ended 0-0 on the weekend. We almost got a very nearly replica of the not Jose Mourinho, it was Antonio Conte and Thomas Tuchel at Stamford Bridge, where they like shake their hands and they like, you know, hold on for a bit, you know, sort of argy-bargy sort of stuff. But the real question is, will still be Southampton manager come the end of the season? And you do not want to know how many tries that took me to get. But we finally did it. There we go. And my answer to that question is probably not with the results he's currently got. You know, Will Still at the moment, I don't think he's producing enough to sustain the Southampton playoff push, that's promotion push this season. And the Championship is very competitive. They've got a few teams in there that haven't been in the Premier League for a few years that want to challenge, like the likes of Frank Lampard's Coventry City. So yeah, Will Still is not the man for the job for me so far for Southampton. And that is the end of this game week review. If you did enjoy, please do like and subscribe, as it really helped me out and makes me want to continue making these videos. Have a good week, everybody, and as always, stay loyal. Bye-bye.